Yes.
So, Nivedita, last time I was talking about my having got posted to the College of Combat, now known as the Army War College. And this was after completing my tenure at one corps in Mathura, which I did for about 20 months. And moved to Mau. Now, Mau is a southern part of UP. There's a finger of UP extending into Madhya Pradesh, where you have Mau. And it's a military station. MHOW. Nobody knows what those initials stand for. But nonetheless, it's near Indore.
Indore. I have been to Mo.
Oh, you have.
Yes.
The College of Combat was the old infantry school, large buildings from the days of partition. And we were establishing a new set of buildings for the Army War College, which was under construction. And when I went there, we were helping in that construction and design, accommodation for officers and for various. There's a battalion of infantry and a squadron of armor also for demonstration purposes there for the course of instruction. Mao is an area which has got a large amount of open area all around, various types of terrain where you can do military exercises and very adequately positioned for one of the higher value training establishments of the Indian Army. Now, I told you that I'd also done the Staff College in Wellington. This is a higher grade of tactical course. Staff College is done at the level of captains and majors, whereas this is done at the level of lieutenant colonels in those days who had finished command of a unit, of an infantry battalion or a tank regiment. Nowadays, the command is of a full colonel. But that's, Parkinson's law of upgradation. Actually, the lieutenant colonel was the one who used to command. In my time also, when I commanded my tank regiment, I was a lieutenant colonel. So these gentlemen used to be selected by the military secretary's branch, depending on how they have progressed in their career so far. If they were found adequately trained and acceptable for higher rank, then they were selected by the military secretary's branch to attend this course. There was no entrance test as such as you have in the staff college. The selection by the Army headquarters, military secretary's branch, who are responsible for the careers of Army officers and their postings and their promotions. So these selected gentlemen used to come from all ranks, from all arms and services, and they do a 1 year's course. We allow them to bring their families because we have accommodation for families and their children. And they're very happy there for 1 year. And I was telling you that when I went into this command, the British sent a Major General who was the commandant of their staff college at Camberley in UK to find out what the Indians were doing about the so-called higher command corps and whether the British Army should also follow suit or not. So he went to Army headquarters and got permission from the military training directorate, who rang me up. I said, yes, you can send him. And he told the military secretary, the military training directorate and Army headquarters that he wanted to send 2 British officers to do this course, just to find out what it's all about. So they said, you go and ask the commandant when you go to Mao. So he arrived in Mao, and he had already been permitted by us to walk around and see the classes and so on. Now, the College of Combat does a number of courses. You start from captains and all that doing the junior command course. Then you come to senior majors doing the senior command course. And now people, after they become lieutenant colonels and commanded the units, you do the higher command course. And this course lasts a whole year. And after he saw the syllabus, he came to see me and he said, look, I've looked at your syllabus. So it's very similar to what we do in the staff college, except it's a higher level. And we'd like to try that in the British Army. So I'd like to send 2 officers to do this course. So I told him, I said, I'm sorry, it's a confidential course. He said, I've seen your syllabus. There's nothing confidential about it. It's the same tactics that we British have taught you. So I said, there are 1 or 2 things here different to what you taught us. Firstly, this course, because England has not got any land borders. Britain has got only a sea surrounding it. As I told you earlier, their armies fight elsewhere. They go to the continent or to go to other people's countries, fight there, and when things get too hot, they run away from there, as they've done, and so have the Americans. They don't defend their own land because it's difficult for people to cross the seas to take them on. Now, in India's case, like Russia, like China, like Germany, and like Europe, France, we've got land borders, huge land borders. Therefore, our concept of military training is a bit different. And I said, we train our officers here on the actual land borders. So what is their army commanders who are manning the land borders? We don't change anything that the army commander wants to do, but we train our officers based on the terrain and the type of enemy facing you and the type of troops you have got, so that they learn the art of defense and attack on our land borders. Now, we've got land borders in the high mountains facing Tibet. We've got mountainous borders and plain borders with Pakistan. We've also got a hilly terrain, very thick jungles with Burma. And of course, we've got a huge border with Bangladesh. When it was East Pakistan, it was antagonistic, but with Bangladesh, they have friendly relations. So we only have police on these borders. So anyway, we take this terrain and we actually train officers on the terrain. They do reconnaissance on the actual ground. Therefore, it's confidential. We don't want foreign officers to see what our plans are for the defense of this land. So he said, no, this is not what we taught you. You have to be able to train in a general manner and allow foreign officers also to come and see what you're doing. So we're all friendly countries. Second thing, he found that we don't write annual confidential report. Now, every year, there's an annual confidential report written to all government servants, whether they are military or civil. It happens in the civil sector also, in the private sector. So that you decide who's to be promoted, who's not to be promoted, and what sort of job should be given to various people. So I told him, in this high command course, we don't write the annual confidential report. We write a course report, but we don't write an annual confidential report. He said, no, that's not what the British have taught you. I said, the British are very good teachers. There's no doubt that you have taught us very well. But like a good student is one who goes far beyond his teacher in due course of time. So I said, we in India do think that we have gone far beyond you. You've got a small little country which has a very small army. You hardly have 2 divisions or 3 divisions. So we have something like 35 divisions. There are massive borders to protect. And therefore, we have gone beyond your teaching. And he and I did not quite agree with each other, but nonetheless, I did not permit any foreign officer to attend this higher command course. That gave you a little sense of the type of training we do there. At that very time, on our eastern border, that is Command Frontier Division of Arunachal Pradesh, there was a little fiddle on the border by a Chinese group who had come inside. river called the the Sumradong Tube. This was around 1986 or thereabout, when I just taken over. So I ran a series of war games, making students Chinese commanders and Indian commanders separately, so that a sort of a war would be created, a false war. And we sent our students to actual reconnaissance of the ground itself. That we visited Eastern Command, we visited the Command Frontier Division, and our students went around, met the corps commanders and the div commanders and everybody, and then came back and made their plans, and we were doing this discussion. This is an exercise in the mental capacity to understand as to how the enemy would attack you and how the best method of defense. And we came to the conclusion that if the type of defenses that we thought ought to be there, that the Chinese attack, if it took place, would not succeed very much, because there are great mountains there, favorable to us in many ways. And so we were quite confident of how to handle this little fiddle on the border. More about it later, when the correct time comes. We also looked at the Pakistan border and the Kashmir line of control and so on and so forth as to what happens there and what ought to be done. Now, I must tell you that our young men, it's not only in the military, it's all over our country. They're very, very sharp. Their brains are very sharp. And when you give them the guidance, they come out with ideas and attitudes which I think must be taken note of, because all of us who are elder and teachers, we have to learn a lot from our students. I don't know if you agree there, since you've got a lot of experience in this yourself. But many students do have new ideas, new things. There's an old saying, out of the mouths of babes, many times comes the truth. Because their minds are not overburdened with the hundreds of problems that an elder person has. They see a simple problem and they come to a simple conclusion as to how it should be handled. Many times, that is the best solution, or a reasonably good solution. So I think we got on very well. I got to know a lot of young officers of the army who had just commanded their units. As we went on in life, many of them became very senior and became army commanders and even chiefs. Many of them have been my students. It is a great pleasure to see how keen and hardworking they all were. Now, Mao is a very nice cantonment station, and we were on a very good relationship with the University of Indore, and also with the deputy commissioner and the administration and other people, the civilian groups. They used to invite us to various functions, cultural functions and other functions. And I also contacted the University of Indore to come and examine our training and suggest to us if we should improve it in any way. And I wanted an MPhil degree to be given after 1 year's study of these officers in military sciences. So they sent a team of professors, 4 or 5 professors, to see what all we were doing. And they made a few suggestions of changes which we incorporated. After all, professors are professors, and they know from the educational and intellectual point of view as to how to develop the student's mind. And one of the things they introduced was the dissertation, that you have, by the time you finish a year, a dissertation must be written, which the student has to do before he can be. And dissertation was sent to the Indore University for their professors to have it. The result of this was that we did manage to get the University of Indore to accept granting students of the higher command course after this 1 year's course and a dissertation, the degree of MPhil in military sciences of the University of Indore. But this relationship was very interesting. Another thing was that there are some scientific establishments between Mao and Indore, and I contacted these people. You may recollect that we had a very good nuclear scientist called Raja Ramana, and he used to come there quite often. He later became the RRM for a short while when I was the chief, and it was a great pleasure to meet this gentleman. He not only was a nuclear scientist of repute, he assisted in the first uh, atomic bomb explosion, of the peaceful nuclear explosion, as it was called by Indira Gandhi in 1974, and also assisted in the final set of explosions that took place under Vajpayee in 1998, when we exploded 5 or 6 nuclear devices. Raja Raman was very much involved in all this, and he used to come to his scientific establishment. So I contacted him and invited him over, asked him to give a talk to my students. So I come across, we used to get foreign outside people to talk to our students, and very interesting. And then he permitted our high command course to come and examine and visit his scientific establishments near Indore, between Indore and Mao, which were off limits to civilians normally, but for the military, he allowed us to. We were briefed as to what the scientific establishment is doing for our country. This is all a matter of improving the minds of our senior military students. Uh, when they meet other areas of endeavor of India, whether they were private or whether they are official and government servants, but the fact is they broaden their viewpoint and also make a lot of friends amongst the civilian community. Now, in the College of Combat, we had to do a lot of adventure training also. There was a lake over there called the Birsa Lake, and we had about 3 or 4 sailing boats, enterprise class. So I spoke to my elder brother who was in the engineers, and they do a lot of sailing. And I spoke to the Navy in Bombay and managed to get some enterprise class latest design boats. We mustered about 8 or 9 sailing boats and encouraged both the staff and the students to go sailing. Now, the Birsa Lake is a large lake, quite deep, surrounded by hills on all sides, and the buffets of winds coming from various directions. And it required good helmsmanship and a good aspect of sailing to prevent your boat being toppled over. Anyway, in case you did get toppled over, we had rescue systems and all that. There was a story over here also. One of my students, Lieutenant Colonel Mehta of the engineers, he wanted to go and sail. Since he's an engineer officer, he told my staff over there that he's a very good sailman and therefore he must take the best boat, which is my boat. I had some very nice blue sails, which I specially purchased for this boat. And he took this boat out and he toppled upside down in the middle of the lake. And then when the rescue team came, he was in a rush to come back because one of his some class positions had to be discussed, so he had to reach somewhere very early. He was in a rush, so he said, our staff has to correct the boat. They have to turn it up. If it's in the water, you have to turn it right side up. And sometimes you have to remove the sails first before you can do that. And he said, no, you do it just like that. So the staff said, if you do it like that, the sails will get shredded because they are under the water. He said, no, I'm a expert helmsman and I know all about this. So you go ahead. Cut this boat towed accordingly, and the result, those blue sails, especially purchased, were all into shreds. They were no longer any good. So I had him hauled up. I said, look here, firstly, you're not a good helmsman. And I checked up your antecedents. You're not a sailor. And you first claimed that you were a sailor when you were not. And secondly, you shredded the sails. So you owe the staff, the College of Combat, the cost of those sails. He said, well, I'll pay the money, sir. I said, no, you won't pay the money. He's one of my best students, by the way. I said, you'll go far in life. So I will take it out of you in due course of time. But please remember that you owe me. He said, all right. And that's it. More about that later. Uh, we had a demonstration squadron there. It was an infantry battalion, and there was a tank squadron with whom very good relations were kept, and they many times assisted in our various exercises and so on the field. Now, talking about this little fiddle by the Chinese in a place called Sumrodongchu. Now, if you remember in the 1962 war when we had this uh, little incident where the Chinese attacked India and we ran away from the east. So we did very well in Ladakh because I think some of the commanders failed in the aspect, senior commanders failed in the aspect of guts. Uh, that was in a river Nala called the Namkachu. Now, the Namkachu is opposite the Subradang, height of about 11,000 feet. Namkachu comes from west to east, and the Sumradongchu comes from east to west. They join together to a river called the Niamjiangchu, which comes from Tibet down through Bhutan into the Tista Valley. So in that area, we had a distinct post of our intelligence because they're part of Indian territory. And the Chinese came and shoot those chaps off, occupied the area with about a company of infantry. Now, this incident was taking place at that time. Eastern Army commander was a very great friend of mine called J.K. Puri, Lieutenant General J.K. Puri. He was in my company in the Indian Military Academy. He senior to me by about 6 months. And he was a junior under officer. And we knew each other when we were cadets in the academy. I was junior to him. And now he was commanding Eastern Army. I spoke to him. And he told me that what they are doing is that they've concentrated some troops forward, but there's a big discussion going on in the government of India as to whether we should allow Indian troops to face the Chinese troops because there may be war. And India didn't want to go to war. Anyway, I did a big study of this whole aspect in the College of Combat. We had a huge sand model prepared of the whole terrain. We sent our students on reconnaissance to Eastern Command to this area with the assistance of the local corps commander. Corps commander was an engineer officer called Narahari, a very fine officer. He was from the engineers, and he hosted us, allowed our students to go up to Tawang and all those areas to have a look at the terrain, to see the ridge lines beyond which the Chinese had come. And then we came back and we had a huge war game. We divided the students into two parts. One was the Chinese army, one was the Indian army, and we had generals downwards appointed. And we carried on this war game for a few weeks to understand how such a battle would go and what are the sort of defenses required in case it develops into a full-scale conflict. And our conclusion was that even if it does become a full-scale conflict, the Chinese will get a bloody nose because our defenses are very strong. So with that confidence, we passed on the details of our war game to Eastern Command so that if they found anything of interest, they could utilize. I don't know if they did or if they did not. Anyway, this was ongoing. It started in 1986, carried on 87. In fact, it carried on up to 1988 almost. So the Chinese president was a chap called Deng Xiaoping. He's a man who developed various aspects of China extremely well. I must give it that very top-class leadership. He developed the economy, he developed the social system, he developed all these, then he developed the military also. And Xi Jinping, who came two more presidents after him, is taking full advantage of that development that Deng Xiaoping had arranged. Anyway, when I was in staff college instructor, as a lieutenant colonel, I was in charge of the China study group, explain to our students what China is up to, and I studied Mao's Red Book and all that sort of thing, and various writings. So I thought I knew quite a lot about what their aims were. Anyway, I think we were able to convey to our students various aspects of how such a conflict has to be managed to develop confidence. Because, because of the Indian rout in 1962, right from the government downwards, they were a little fearful, shall I say, of confronting the Chinese monster in the north. But we realize now that we have developed far more, and that I think we can take advantage of our terrain to the detriment of Chinese actions. Uh, that's one of the lessons we learned there. And all these boys who were lieutenant colonels later on became army commanders and all that, they have understood those lessons. In Mao, we had in the College of Combat various courses going on at the same time. While the higher command course was going on, we had a higher command wing run by a Major General Badwa. And I was taking a lot of interest in that because it's the higher level of tactical thinking. Then we had a senior command wing run by another Major General, where majors were being trained to take over units of the army, battalions and tank regiments and artillery regiments and so on. And we had a junior command wing run by a brigadier. So we had all this, plus very good relations with the infantry school next door, which was commanded by a Lieutenant General Ranbir Singh, who not only ran infantry courses of weapons and junior tactics and senior tactics, but also the commando wing, which was in Belgaum near beyond Pune, between Pune and Goa, where there was a commando wing. And Ranbir had an officer there called V Sharma, who was a major general. And Ranbir himself was a lieutenant general. Plus his number two was a Gurkha officer called J.B. Rawat. He was a very fine officer from the Gurkhas, and he was the senior officer of the Gurkha Brigade. We have about 30 battalions of Gurkhas from Nepal, and he was the senior officer there. He became a major general later. We also had in Mao the College of the MCE, Military College of Technical Engineering. That's the signals setup, commanded by a Lieutenant General Shankar Meherish, his name was, and Shankar Mehrotra. So we have 3 lieutenant generals in Mao, and we made it our business to be very friendly with each other so that the 3 separate institutions got on well. And if there was any requirement between one institution and another institution, we could get that assistance so that the training of students in all these 3 institutions was adequately managed. And this is a very interesting period of time. In training your officers, the instructors themselves learn a lot because new pamphlets are written, new techniques are written, and we examine all. Now, while all this was going on, General Sundarji had taken over as the army chief from General Krishna Rao, and Sundarji had decided to run a very large exercise. This exercise was called Brass Tacks. Now, it was very well organized, this exercise. It was supposed to be a war between India and Pakistan. That's the basis of the exercise. It started with some tutorial discussions, shall we call them? That is known as tactical exercise without troops. That means we had syndicates of senior officers in the parade ground in Delhi who were given various problems. And there was an enemy syndicate representing Pakistan. And they made me in charge of that syndicate because I was in the College of Combat. So I was not in actual command of any of the troops in the various commands of India. There's Northern Command and Western Command. And Sundarji's idea was to exercise those commanders. So I was instructed that you will be the enemy commander. And the staff of the enemy commander I had to select from my own people in the College of Combat. So in the College of Combat, we had to then study Pakistan. What is the latest organizations? Where are the types of divisions and corps? who's commanding them, where are they located, what are their tactical plans, where are the reserves, what are their logistics movements from places of peace stations to warlike areas. And they've got two armored divisions, for instance. One is in the north, at a place called Kharia, and one is in central Pakistan and Multan, looking after the central sector, that's the Punjab border, the northern Rajasthan border. And the one at Kharia is looking after the J&K border. These are two main reserves. Then what is the type of aircraft they've got? Where are they located? What have they got in Karachi in the Navy? What are their capabilities? So we had to study all this. And I appointed from among my staff some of my instructors as various commanders of Pakistan, so that we had a team ready and we examined as to how we should fight with India. And eventually we came on the chute to Delhi, and this was done. We made our plans, and Sundati had done a big show. He called the defense minister, who now the RRM was Mr. Arun Singh, whom I knew very well, but coming from the corporate sector, I told you, during the Asian Games. And he had become the RRM, so he was invited. And the defense minister was invited. And they all attended parts of this discussion to see how it was going. Then this portion after it was over, then there was an actual exercise with troops on the ground. This very big exercise in northern Rajasthan and southern Punjab area. And this was a north-south battle, with the border with Pakistan on the west, with the north-south sort of battle. And we had a very large corps called the 2 Corps, commanded by General Hanuj Singh, which was supposed to be attacking with about 6 or 7 types of formations. And we had another corps in defense, and it's an armored division in the south and an armored division of the enemy. We had 2 armored divisions. And in fact, for the first exercise run in India, where it was an armored division against an armored, besides other infantry and rapid and other type of divisions that had been organized. So I must give it to the organizers that they did a very good exercise. But this had some results. And since I had been the enemy commander, I was made the chief umpire for this exercise. And I had to position myself in the middle of the desert with my staff and electronics, warfare equipment, etc., to try and see how to manage this exercise. Not easy to manage an exercise of thousands of vehicles and tanks and men. Every regiment of tanks comprises some 45 tanks or 48 tanks. Every regiment was represented by about 14 tanks. Now, the trouble with these big exercises is that, yes, the generals and brigadiers are trained because of their tactics and the way they handle their troops. Actual movements are done because the actual troops on the ground are about 1/3 what they actually be in war. Nonetheless, the huge transport problems and concentration from point A to point B takes time and effort. Aircraft was also involved with the Indian Air Force, both from the enemy side and from outside, so that the pilots will also get trained. But in this sort of exercise, firstly, crores of rupees are spent. Secondly, the tanks are actually moved for so many hundreds of kilometers, with the result, their maintenance and life cycle is reduced. And thirdly, the training of troops is not good, because you're representing a whole infantry battalion by one company, and you're representing a tank regiment by about 48 tanks, with about 14 tanks. So they just go line ahead, one behind the other, without the tactical training that is necessary at this level. So at least I understood, and I said so in my briefing as the chief umpire, that this is a big waste of time. It's a waste of money and it's a waste of time. Yes, you're training the generals. But if you want to train commanders and generals, you should do it in war games on the sandbar, not with actual troops. Actual troops training has to be done with the full regiment on the ground by the commanding officer or by the brigade commander at a lower level, so that each tactics by sections and platoons of the infantry and by troops and squadrons of the armored tanks is examined and practiced, and lessons brought out as to how you should handle in actual war. So I was not of the agreement. I was not in agreement with such a large exercise for training senior commanders at the cost of the equipment being deteriorated. You know, every tank has its mileage, after which an engine overhaul and other things have to be done. Same with every vehicle. So if you run them in exercises, then they're not fit for war. Anyway, that was the lesson. I didn't think much of it. Anyway, it had some effects. Since it was near the Pakistan border, the Pakistanis thought that we were concentrating to attack them. After all, you never know. People do exercises, and before you can say Jakravansan, they cross the border. That's what Chinese did in Galwan, for instance. So one of the methods of the military is to do exercises and then certainly convert those exercises into actual operation. This is what the Russians did in Ukraine also. They were doing exercises nearby the border. Everybody thought they'll only do exercises, but then they crossed the border. So the Pakistan mustered their army and came up to defend themselves. Quite rightly so. The result was that there was an international incident. America came into it, Russia came into it, everybody came here. What are you chaps up? Why are you creating a system where they may become a conflict? Government of India was rather concerned about this too. So we have to be careful of doing exercises near the international borders, but that's where the terrain is, you know, Rajasthan desert and so on. And you have to be careful because you don't want to alarm your neighbors. They concentrate their troops. It takes months after that of discussions between military and governments of both sides to de-escalate, as it is called. You've got troops facing each other near the border, and to de-escalate because nobody trusts the other guy takes time. And I think we carried on that for a whole year after that to try and de-escalate. So the large-scale exercises at national level have to be thought of very carefully before you indulge in this. That's the brass tacks exercise. We knew in the Indian Army at that time that basically what I think the then chief was trying to do is to test various major generals and above as to how they function during actual simulated warfare type exercise. And he had brought the politicians in there so that they could also understand what the people say. In other words, if he wanted to act certain senior officers, he did that. That's not received too well as far as the various officer corps was concerned. Anyway, coming back to the exercises with China, about China, the Sumrodongchu incident was developing. And at that time, I completed my tenure of about a year plus in the College of Combat.